Hi, we want to welcome you back to our series, The Christmas Option. We are in week 3 of the Christmas Option. We already studied Mary and Joseph's reaction to the Christmas story, what role they play. And today we're going to be focusing specifically on Herrod. We're going to learn a little bit about King Herrod and what role did he play in this whole process. I want to start with a question like we always do. And our question this week is, when is the last time you remember missing a great opportunity? When is the last time that somebody offered you a great opportunity? You're like, oh, I wish I could have done that. That would have been a great deal. That would have been a great opportunity. I missed it. So just think about that. If you're with somebody, share your answer. If not, just kind of think, meditate on it. And we'll be right back with the beginning of week 3 of the Christmas Option. All right, so we're in the midst of our Christmas Option series, and the Christmas Option, what we mean by that is at the heart of what we mean by this series, which is to see a challenge or the challenge of the characters that we're studying in light of the coming King, right? In light of Christ, in light of the overarching work of salvation, and to see myself as far as something greater that God is doing. That is the Christmas Option, right? All of our characters could have gone one way or could go another. And they have to choose. Am I going to see my reality in light of the coming King? Or am I not going to be able to see my reality in light of the coming King? So far, we spent some time with Mary. And through Mary and reading her story and her humbleness and willingness to follow the request that the angel Gabriel has given to her, we learned that disappointment offers a chance to get closer to God. That our plans, even though they're good, even though they're perfect, even though they're admirable, the reality is that when we face disappointments, it offers us a chance to get closer to God. Why? Because we're human, so therefore our plans are not 100% guaranteed. So therefore we will see disappointments at one point in time in our life. And that gives us an opportunity to be able to grow closer to God, because God's plan never fails, because God is perfect and we're not. And we also saw the life of Joseph, and through the life of Joseph and through the sacrifice of his own great plan, also a good plan, and his willingness to humble himself and to be able to be part of the Christmas Option, right? To be able to look at his reality and disappointments in light of the coming King. It helps us to understand this, that disappointments are an opportunity that sometimes we do miss to trust God, to understand now everything is under my control, so I'm going to trust that God is going to be the one that is going to bring it forth. So I'm going to choose God over even my wisdom in the moment. And today specifically, again, we're going to be focusing on a character that didn't do what Mary and Joseph did. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on Herod. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember Blockbuster video rental? Do you remember that, right? It used to be a bunch of stores throughout the United States. And it used to be that you couldn't just put a movie on TV through your Xbox or even through a smart TV or through your computer or whatever system you have. So this idea that we can watch movies even on our phone, on anywhere that we are, in whichever moment that we want, that's just a new reality. Before, even within my lifetime, I had to get in my car and I had to drive to a store and I had to rent a video DVD that I could take home and be able to watch a movie. So every Friday, every Thursday, this is kind of part of life. We will go to a store like this. There will be rows and rows of movies. And I will go in there and I will look to the different categories of movies to be able to look at the new one, to be able to look at the one that I wanted out of all these rows and rows and rows of movies. I will choose specifically the one that I wanted to be able to watch. I could put some popcorn, I could get some candy, and this was part of the normal life of many of us on every Thursday, every Friday. And the reality is that Blockbuster was huge at the time. In the year 2000, for example, Blockbuster was one of the largest companies in the United States. 40% of the whole market, 44 out of every 10 movies that were rented in the United States will be rented in a video store. 65 million registered customers, just to give you an idea, that will be the whole population of the country of France. $5 billion were made on the year 2000 by Blockbuster Video, and they had 9,000 stores all the way throughout the United States. So it was a huge, huge company. And then a little guy shows up out of nowhere. This little guy with a little website, a little company named Netflix. They created this website that you could go to, and you couldn't watch movies on the website. What you could do is that you could rent movies through the website. So I would have to go to the website, I would have to create a list of the movies that I wanted, and I could have up to 4 of them out, and I would mail them back. They would mail them to me, I will watch it, and I will mail them back, and I could be mailing back and forward. So it's not like I just watch it in my house like Netflix is, but it was a website that I could be sending movies in and out, in and out. This is what Netflix looked like in the year 2000. So the problem with Netflix is that it only had 0.2% of all the market, right? So it had a tiny, not 2%, but 0.2%. So it had a tiny, tiny share of the market. It had 300,000 registered customers as opposed to 65 million. And it has sold on that year $35 million worth of movie rentals. But the problem is that in order to have all the licenses for all the movies and to have the inventory, they had spent $50 million. So in other words, there were about $20 million in the hole, and they had no stores whatsoever. So Netflix was just, I mean, to say that Netflix was tiny compared to Blockbuster is not even a good comparison. It was nothing. They were like nothing, right? So they decide, hey, we can go to Blockbuster, right? Netflix, specifically the co-founder of Netflix named Mark Randolph, he decided we can go to Blockbuster and we can talk to them and we can sell Netflix to them and let's see what happens. So I want to let Mark be the one who shares the story with you right now through this video.
All the Blockbuster guys came in their very expensive suits, and we were there in our Silicon Valley t-shirts and jeans, and we all sat down to pitch. And we said, it's great, we will do the online business, you'll do the stores, we'll have synergy, won't that be great? And they shook their heads in the right place, and then they asked the big question, how much should we pay for you? And my partner, Reed, screwed up his courage, and he said, $50 million? And that's exactly the reaction that they had. So the meeting went downhill very quickly after that, and it was a long, quiet ride on the plane back home to California.
So literally, Blockbuster laughed them out of the room, right? They like, you crazy? $50 million, I ain't paying $50 million for you. You're $20 million in the hole, right? So Blockbuster had the chance, the opportunity to be part of the Netflix story by paying $50 million. They choose not to, and yet today, this is a reality. Right? Netflix is selling, it has over 282 million customers throughout the world. It makes over $39 billion, much more than Blockbuster ever did. It still has no store while Blockbuster is bankrupt, and it has one store left in Oregon. Literally, there's one store left of all the Blockbusters. This is the only Blockbuster store in all the United States. So you might ask yourself, well, why is this important? Why? Because so far, we've been talking about people who had chosen the Christmas option that shows to be able to look at their circumstances in light of a coming king, and they humble themselves and they submit their plan, and in many ways die to their plan in order for the plan of God to be able to be fulfilled in their life, right? They saw their challenge in light of the coming king. But like Blockbuster, Herrod sees the opportunity to choose the Christmas option and chooses not to, right? He chooses fear, and he chooses anger, and he chooses not to. And we're going to see how exactly this unfolds as we look at Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1, right? Now, in that story, they're not the focus of our time this morning, but in that story, we're going to run into the Magi. And just a couple things that we want to let you know real quick. Number one, there were not 3 Magi, but we don't know how many Magi there were. What there were 3 gifts. Right, so there could have been 50, there could have been 60, there could have been 100. We don't know. We do know that they brought 3 gifts, but we don't know how many Magi. So this whole idea that they had names, there's no names provided by them in the Bible, and we would have known that they most likely would have come from Persia. They would have come to, they had some understanding of mystical knowledge, and through that, and to following the stars, they have come to be able to worship, to look for the coming king, to be able to worship Jesus. But more importantly, they were not Jewish. They were coming from outside the Jewish culture to be able to recognize this king. So if you're looking for the fact, if you know that there's a new king and you're looking for the king, that the most logical thing for you to do is to go to the palace. to go find the king. So that's exactly what they do, right? As Gentiles, they come new into a place, they go to the palace looking for the king, right? But again, our focus today is on Herod. And Herod is the king at the time. And as you can tell, this is a problem, because if somebody walks into your kingdom and they're like, hey, we're looking for the king, we're looking for the new king, and you're like, hold on a second, I'm the king of this kingdom. Who are you talking about? Right? Like, so that created a conflict that we're going to see worked out here in a second. So again, Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 reads like this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? Very interesting terminology, because especially in Jewish culture, but true in other realities, is that usually there would be a coming king, an anointed king, while there was a king already in place. So when we look at the Old Testament, probably the story that is more commonly used, that you can see this effect, is that David is anointed king while Saul still the king, right? So we have princes, even in today, even in the kingdoms that exist today, there's a coming king while there's a king. So people are usually not born kings, they're born princesses, or they're in the process of becoming king. But in this case, the Magi are clear that they're looking for the one who has been born king of the Jews. So this king, in difference to every other king, didn't have to wait for something to happen. They have been born king of the Jews. Their status was from birth. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Again, very unlikely, right? They're not saying we come in to establish diplomatic relationship. We come to develop a relationship. We come to have peace talks, or whatever the case is. No, they're saying we're coming to worship him. So there's two things that are happening here that are unique to this interaction. One, that the Magi realize that he's already the king. He's not a common king, but one who is already a king. And number two, that this is the Son of God that is connected to the divine, that is connected with God, and is deserving of worship. So, verse 3, when Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And again, one of the most important things for us to be able to keep in mind when we read this verse is that this verb, disturb, is the same verb that was used, exactly the same verb that was used when describing the reaction of Mary to the words of Angel Gabriel. Literally said, hey, when she heard this, she was disturbed. So there is this moment, right, this crisscross, or this fork in the road, that both Mary, right, I would add Joseph and King Herod, they all find themselves in this reality. I have plans, I had a direction that I already have in place, and the unexpected arrival of a king, of a new king, has diverted my plan. What am I going to do about it? Right? So King Herod is disturbed, and on top of that, all of Jerusalem is disturbed also. Right? So Jerusalem itself finds itself in the same position that Mary and Joseph have found themselves in. And you realize, well, is Jerusalem disturbed in the same way? Well, they're disturbed in a little bit different reality. Most theologians will agree that the reason why they're disturbed is because of King Herod. So King Herod was historically, famously paranoid about his leadership. So therefore, if something is upsetting the king, all the people are going like, oh, here we go again. What else is this guy going to do, right? Because in one hand, Herod had done incredibly good things. Number one, among the good things that he did, he has established a market management system with a food distribution process that had created a market that have avoided famine in the land for generations, which is incredible, right? If you were part of Israel, or if you were a part of the area, in this semi-desert area, the reality is you would expect that at some point in time there was going to be famine. There have been no famine under the leadership of Herod. On the opposite hand, Herod also built amazing buildings, right? So you have, this is the palace of Herod, improvements to the temple, connected the temple to the city, and he added pools. There were different places where he added pools, which is important, right? Because that helped with the water distribution within the context of the city. You didn't have to go to a well. There were places where you could go and be able to get water. So he had multiple pools throughout the city So he had been a great administrator, had done great things. But on the flip side of that, Herod was also extremely paranoid about his leadership. And when I say paranoid, I mean, it's at the level that he killed his wife at one point in time because he suspected it without any evidence that we know of that she was trying to take the throne. And he also killed 2 of his own sons because he was afraid that they were going to somehow be able to take the power. And one of the things that clearly Herod is struggling with is a reality that we all have to face at one point in time. That transition and power changes are normal. That transition and power changes are normal. Now, I might be a leader in a specific moment in my life, but that doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed to be in charge for the rest of my life. And you might think, oh, okay, that's important if you're a manager, if you're the president of the country or the president of the company or something like that. Well, no, it's true in every aspect of our life, right? The most common for us is like, one day my kids will be on their own, right? Like, so I have a period of time where I am in charge of my kids and I get to be the steward of the life of my kids. But my kids, and I'm experiencing that right now, more and more are becoming their own man and they're making their own decision. And actually from the very beginning that our kids are born, they are in the process of becoming independent. And part of our role is to be able to help them get them there. So transition and power changes are normal. It's just a normal part of how life goes. The same thing happened even in our marriage, right? Our relationships are going to change over time. Our positions are going to change. And you might feel that you have a power right now. And if you lose that power, there's a transition. Sometimes we get uncomfortable with that reality. When the reality is transition and power changes are normal, our normal part of life. Even more to the point, there is a leader named Andy Stanley that puts it this way. Leadership is stewardship. In other words, leadership, the position of leadership, is something that you get to steward. It doesn't belong to you. You get to administer for a period of time, but it doesn't belong to you. Eventually, it's going to be with somebody else. So leadership is stewardship. It is temporary. It's not permanent. It's not forever. Only God is forever, right? So I'm going to steward for a period of time, and I have an opportunity to be able to build my legacy and to be able to bless other generations with my decision. But leadership is stewardship, and it's temporary, right? And you're accountable. We are going to have to answer to God, what do we do or not with our families, with the leadership as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, as a member of my community, right? I'm going to be accountable for the resources to the level that I had them, to the opportunities that were in front of me, right? Leadership is stewardship, it's temporary, and I am accountable for that. Verse 4 continues our story, and it says this: when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law. So he calls all the leaders to come, right? The Sadducees and the Pharisees to come forward. He asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, right? So he knew that they were going to be in Bethlehem of Judea. So this is what Herod said. Hey, right? He's already concerned. He's paranoid about this reality, but he's trying to be sneaky. So what he does is like, hey, I'll tell you what, Magi, you go and you worship this king, right? You go find him, worship him, and I want you to let me know where he's at so that I can go worship him too. I want to worship too. I want into this, right? But the reality is that he was lying, right? He wanted the Magi to be able to find whoever this was so that he can kill that baby, so he can kill the coming king, so that he wouldn't have to feel paranoid, right? So he could have control over the circumstances and control over what was happening around him. So God tells the Magi decide to go in a different route. They never go back to Herod. And this is what happens, right? So verse 13, we picked up the story. It says this: when they had gone, they meaning the Magi, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. And if you're Joseph, you're going like, here we go again. What do you want now? Right? Last time that I saw you in a dream, I had to give up all my dreams and I had to change my whole plan. What is going on? Right? So the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and he said, get up. He said, take the child and his mother, escape to Egypt, stay there until I'll tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. What? What is going on? I mean, was it enough, right? If you're Joseph reading this, you're like, was it enough that I destroyed my reputation, I changed all my plans, I'm living with my father and mother-in-law instead of living comfortably in Bethlehem. And here I am having to go through all of this, right? Like, what? Why am I having to deal with this? Why am I involved in this reality? I'm barely getting stable again. I'm barely getting things going on here in Bethlehem. I'm barely getting back with my family. And now you want me to leave all the way to Egypt? I don't know anybody in Egypt. What am I going to do in Egypt? Right? So about verse 14 says this. Again, he finds himself in that place where he has to make a decision. And Joseph makes the right choice, right? So verse 14 says, so he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herrod. Again, he did what he needed to be done. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said to the prophet, out of Egypt I call my son. So Joseph decides to be able to look at his reality in light of the coming king. He once again is obedient to that which God is calling him to do. And now is Herod's opportunity to be able to do the same. But instead, this is what happens. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. In other words, Herod allowed fear and anger to guide his actions. Right? That same reality where the first thing that the angel says to Mary and says to Joseph is, do not fear. Right? Do not fear. Right? It's okay to be disturbed in a moment. It's okay to be surprised. But don't let fear, and fear becomes anger. Don't let anger be the one who is driving your actions, because you're going to make a horrible mistake. So here's Herod, right? He feels not angry, but furious with the circumstances around him. And the verse continues, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and his vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Wow. Wow. Leadership is temporary. Leadership is stewardship. It's temporary. You're accountable. Herod, you don't own the position of king of Israel. You don't own it. You have to give account to God for what you did. And Herod, instead of protecting his people, instead of caring for them, instead of using the position and the power he's in to care for them, he kills them. And he kills the most vulnerable members of his community. 2.5-year-old and younger in a whole community. So imagine if instead he had recognized the chance that was coming and leaned into it, right? Imagine if he could have seen himself as part of the legacy of Jesus' story. Imagine if he could have been willing to be more than just a dark spot in the history of Israel, but he would have chosen to use all his resources and all his power to be able to support the plan that God had. This is the point that Herod missed. That God is more concerned with who you are than the position you hold. God is more concerned with who you are than the position you hold. So, as we do every week, I want to close with a question. And I really want you to be honest about this question. I really want you to dig into this question. And I hope that it keeps you up this week and makes you really think about your actions in light of the plan of salvation that God is bringing to this community and beyond. How would you have reacted if you were Herod? How you would have reacted? What actions you would have taken? Would you have followed the example of Joseph once again and decide, I got to do what I got to do. I got to do what it needs to be done. Or would you have chosen anger, paranoia, and control and lose that which you tried to save in the process? Dear God, we come before your presence, Lord, and we humble ourselves. We know that we have chosen anger and we have chosen fear, that we have not trusted you, that we have not grown closer to you in the face of our disappointments. And Lord, help us, protect us, that we will be reminded that leadership is stewardship, is temporary, and we're accountable, that we will answer for the leadership that we have in our family and to our spouses, in our community, Lord, to help us to be who you call us to be. In the name of Jesus, we ask you this. Amen and amen.